Hello, everyone. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. I'd love to see in the comment box where we have people chiming in from. I'm sure some of you have stayed on from the previous talk with Bruce Damer, and some of you will be coming on new. So let us know where you're coming in from. Thank you all for being here and also for being patient. We've had a few technical difficulties. I think the entire internet and everyone we're learning how to adjust to this virtual social framework. So we really appreciate your patience with all of this. Looks like we've got Germany, Denver, Seattle, Wales, Brooklyn. Wonderful. Thank you all for being here. So I'm just going to go over a few things on where everything's situated in this virtual room. On the bottom right, there's a chat box. You can comment in there and connect with each other. And on the very bottom, there is a specific tab that says Ask a Question. This is going to be where you'll want to ask questions for the Q&A. And not only can you ask your questions there, but also you can vote on questions that other people have asked. That's helpful in prioritizing questions for us because we may not be able to get to everyone's question. Today, we're going to have a 1-hour fireside chat with Terence McKenna and Luis Eduardo Luna, followed by 30 minutes of Q&A, and then there will be a 30-minute breakout session. Following that, on the next Saturday, April 11th, we will have Paul Stamets and Wade Davis coming on to speak. And the following Saturday, April the 18th, we'll have Rupert Sheldrake and Ralph Abrams speaking. And so stay tuned. These are going to be some really amazing conversations as we honor Terence's legacy and we really bring that momentum forth into the world today. Let me see if there's anything else we need to talk about. I think at this point we're ready to welcome on Terence McKenna. He is a pharmacologist and the principal founder of the McKenna Academy of Natural Philosophy. He is a founding board member of the Hefter Research Institute. He organized the ESPD 50 conference in 2017. And his work has been really foundational in the scientific exploration of ayahuasca, as well as many other realms. Dennis, thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to bring you on and give you the stage.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Genevieve. That's wonderful introduction, as usual. Just a minor correction. The guest on the 18th is Rupert Sheldrake, and his last name is Abraham, Ralph Abraham. So if you're Googling him, that will come up. But today it's my pleasure to introduce and discuss Terence and many things with my very good friend Luis Eduardo Luna, who I have known for many years, and perhaps Terence has known him even longer. I'm going to read a little, let me see, I have a bibliography here. I'd like to give you a little background. So Luis is the director of Ayahuasca, Center for Integrator Plants, Visionary Art and the Study of Consciousness, located in Florianopolis, Brazil. And Eduardo is a prolific author and probably the world's expert on ayahuasca from the standpoint of its cultural and ethnographic content. He's the author of Vegetalismo, Shamanism Among the Mestizo Populations of the Peruvian Amazon, which came from his doctoral thesis published in 1986. Later, he published with Pablo Amaringo, Ayahuasca Visions, the religious iconography of a Peruvian shaman. Eduardo and I have a long history of friendship with Pablo, which we'll be talking about. And that was published in 1991. He co-edited with Stephen White of Ayahuasca Reader, the Ayahuasca Reader, Encounters with the Amazon Sacred Vine, which was originally published in 2000, and now is available from Synergetic Press in a new, much expanded and very beautiful edition from Synergetic Press. He co-authored with Rick Strassman, I won't even try to pronounce it, and Luis and Edie Frexka of Inner Paths to Outer Space, Journeys Through Psychedelics and Other Spiritual Technologies. In 1986, he founded with Pablo Amaringo the Usco Ayar Amazonian School of Painting in Pucallpa, Peru. And he's lectured worldwide about Amazonian shamanism, altered states of consciousness, and has curated exhibitions of visionary art in several countries. Luna has over 40 years of experience with ayahuasca in various contexts, and as an anthropologist and with all of the syncretic Brazilian religious organizations that use ayahuasca as a sacrament. So, Eduardo, welcome.
Thank you.
Wonderful to see you. And I am one of the few people that gets to call Luis Eduardo.
Sure.
And I'm sorry, it's a habit. He likes to be called Luis.
No.
My friendship is so old that it's
my
just a matter
my
of
family
habit.
call me Eduardo. You know, my brothers and sisters call me Eduardo. So,
Eduardo, okay. Well,
yeah.
I'm like your brother, so I get to do that. But the world knows you as Luis or Luis Eduardo.
Because it was easier to say Luis than Eduardo. You know.
Yeah. So thank you so much for making the time. I know it's late there in Florianopolis, but
it's okay.
How are you? There was a few
Fine.
things you wanted to bring up. One might be a good place to start, might be our mutual friendship with Pablo Amaringo. I don't know, probably most people listening to this conversation know who he is, but why don't you tell us a little bit about how you met him? I introduced you to him in 1985 when we were there together. So there's a story right there. Let's open it up and talk about that to start with.
Okay, perhaps the story, short one, is that we went to see him, and I realized that he knew very much about the Amazonian tradition. I mean, I was about finishing my doctoral dissertation for the Department of Comparative Religion of Stockholm University. And so I knew, I met a lot of vegetalistas. I was into the plant, the cosmology, and so on. And I realized Pablo knew all about this. Then he told me that he had been a vegetalista, but he has stopped taking ayahuasca for 7 years. So there was a reason. And then when he shows us these landscapes, I had just read, I have read some years ago, Rachel Dolmatov, this book, Beyond the Milky Way. Rachel Dolmatov took white paper and pencils of many colors and went to the Barazana Indians in the Vapes in Colombia and asked the Indians to paint whatever they wanted. And what came out was this, it was Yahé visions, because Rachel Dolmatov realized that all the iconography among the Barazana and other Tucano indigenous groups was all based on their trips, let's say, the journeys to other worlds, and as well in the narrative, everything. So Rachel Dolmatov was one of the anthropologists who realized the importance of Yahé. I will make the decision later. Among Amazonian tribe, Amazonian indigenous group. So that was very important. So I had that in mind. So when Pablo told me that he had been a vegetalista, then I asked him, do you remember the visions you had when you were a vegetalista? And that's what he made the first two paintings. You got one and I have the other one. And
yes.
I went back to,
Let me stop you for a minute, Eduardo.
Yes.
Increase your volume a little bit. I'm seeing things in the chat thread that you're a little bit low.
Okay.
Or turn me down. Here. Someone says, or turn me down.
Let's see. Okay.
Hard to turn me down.
Now?
Maybe that's increase your volume a little bit.
I don't know how to do it here. How can I increase the output? Let me see. Oh, sorry. I will have to go here in just a moment. I'm going to sound just, and then well, I have it at maximum. I'm sorry.
I can hear you.
I can. Okay, I cannot. I can be
Yeah.
closer to the microphone, perhaps. That's it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So sorry
So,
to interrupt. Go on with your story.
so I took my painting. He gave one to you, one to me. Went back to Helsinki. I was then living there. Took a photocopy of it and sent it to Pablo. Well, I sent him some paintings because he wanted some paper and paintings and so on. And so I took a photocopy and I said, "What is this? What is that?" Because I didn't understand. Some of the elements in his paintings were very, very. I knew them, angels and warriors and certain serpents and so on. So I knew that, but there were elements which didn't make sense, including a UFO. So I sent him a letter, and the description came back. And for me, that is very crucial because it's the first time that we have, well, the two paintings, two ayahuasca visions, and a description of who are these people with names, I realized this is a gold mine because I continue providing him with art materials and everything, and making him questions. So he was answering my questions with more visions, and so it was the extraordinary beginning of something completely new because it was the first time that we have somebody, and the very important is that people realize the complexity and the richness of the iconography of a humble man in the Amazon, a humble man who, just like many other mestizos, and realized through Pablo's work that all this is also in the minds of many of the people there in the Amazon. They look, mestizo, but they are into another cosmology. Many of them, of course, they are losing culture and all that. But anyway, there is a substrate there, which for me is animistic. And we can talk about animism later.
Hmm. Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, as you say, his iconography is shared in this mestizo vegetalismo tradition, but Pablo was able to give expression to it. This was the
Exactly.
amazing thing that he was actually, and so together you collaborated on this book, Ayahuasca Visions, the religious iconography of a Peruvian shaman, and your explanations with every facing page of the paintings, which you dissected in great detail. These were not just imaginings, these were sort of explications of the tradition. So that book, to my mind, was one of the most significant contributions to making people aware of ayahuasca in the West, because it was an accessible book. When it came out, it was beautiful. It was, many people bought it. Anyone who was interested in psychedelics and knew about it bought it. And I think it was very important, in the same way that Wasson's article in Life magazine in 1957 made the wider world aware of magic mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms. I really think that your book, which came out in 1991, was it?
Yes.
So before that, there was very little ayahuasca tourism, what we call ayahuasca tourism now.
There was
it was
none.
of interest to a few anthropologists, a few botanists. As you and I know, we both worked in the Amazon in that area since 1981. Tourists were not part of the picture. I mean, it was very rare that occasionally there were always people who were ahead of the curve. But I think the tourism phenomenon, for better or for worse, was probably triggered by the publication of that book. And that got people curious about it. And then they, travel being what it is, they could go down and see for themselves. And, we know that ayahuasca tourism is a double-edged sword. There are definitely good things about it and not so good things. It's had a social impact.
Like anything, Yes. Okay, so.
Can you raise your volume? I still can't hear you.
Okay, I am again. I'm trying to.
I don't know. I don't know what loud. The problem is. Okay. Yeah, so you and I received those two paintings, which I were one of, for myself and I think for you, probably one of the most cherished possessions that we have, and we've sort of been stewards of those objects of art for how long? Ever since 1985, and you and Pablo you worked very hard to make Pablo world famous and by arranging exhibitions and so on. So now we've come to a point where we both have decided that we want to sell those paintings. So you and your son have created a website, is that right, to sell those original paintings and a number of others?
Yeah, okay. Well, trueamaringos.com. Trueamaringos.com.
Two of yours and one of mine, or two of mine, I guess.
True. Verdaderos. Trueamaringos.com.
What is the name of the website?
Trueamaringos.com.
True Amaringos.
True.com, yes.
Amaringos. .com, I guess.
Yeah.
So if people want to look at that. Oh, there you are. Okay. Well, let's
talk about Terence.
What's that?
Let's talk about Terence.
Let's talk about Terence. Exactly what I was going to say.
Exactly.
So all of this took place. I did not meet Eduardo until 1981. I was a graduate student in Vancouver, working on my PhD, which was ayahuasca, and he came to a anthropology conference in Vancouver. That was the first time I was able to actually physically meet him, but I knew about him because he met Terence in 1971. Some of you are familiar with Terence's story. We went to La Chorrera, we did the thing that everybody talks about, but not everybody realizes that after La Chorrera, Terence actually made a second trip into La Chorrera. Later that year, spent a lot of time there, actually started writing the book that turned into The Invisible Landscape. He began the book on that second trip, and on his way out, he and Kume, his girlfriend Erica, went through Florianopolis, which happens to be
Florencia.
Florencia.
Yes.
Right. You're
Colombia.
in Florianopolis now. Sorry, right. I'm confused. No, you went through Florencia, which is your hometown, and just a chance encounter in a cantina. I guess Terence was trying to order a food or something in his horrible Spanish, and you introduced yourself and said, "May I help you?" And that was the first encounter. So why don't you tell us about that and what happened? They ended up staying at your finca for a while, and
okay, it was the story is like this. Well, he had been to La Chorrera. He had nobody to talk to about these things. Suddenly you found some Colombian. I mean, although I have left, I have not been in Colombia for 7 years. I went for holidays when I met Terence, but suddenly somebody who he could speak to. So he was, an avalanche of ideas, and there was Terence. So, and he said that next day he was going to Bogota, and from Bogota his idea was go to Peru. And then he told me about Yahe. And that night I went to see my father, and I told him that I met this gringo who was talking about Yahe, and I was very interested. And then my father said, "Tell your friend that he doesn't need to go to Peru. Yahe is right here. It's right here." Because in Florencia, Florencia is it was a tiny little town when I was born. There was no running water or electricity, and it was created by the Italian missionaries, and then there were still indigenous tribes going through Florencia from time to time to buy some things, some clothes or salt or getting other things. And my grandmother had a little shop, just tiny little place. And Apolinar, you know, the Ingano shaman used to go there, and other Indians used to go there to my grandmother's shop. And I was very interested as a little kid, you know, because they had a hole, you know, the males had a hole in the nose, and I was see if I could see the light on the other side of the hole in the nose, and anyway, so for me, Apolinar, I knew him all my life, you know, since, so so um, so okay, but Apolinar was living in the forest, but we met one of the Villa Gloria, where is the little country house that my parents had. Okay, no, the story is he went to Bogota, went back to Florencia because I told him you don't need to go to Peru. He came back with a lot of books. He went to Bogota to buy books, and then we went together to Villa Gloria, which is a little house, and spent 2 months together there. He was writing the invisible landscape. I was helping to correct the time wave, you know, the quantification of the I Ching, and then he was talking and talking and talking, and I was very eager because I had been always interested, for the first, in philosophy and big things. The other thing is I was always interested in foreigners, which means in the other, always interested in the other. And for me, Terence was somebody else, you know, another. And when I was a child, when they asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I used to say that I want to be a foreigner. Never realized that I was going to be forever a foreigner, because I left Colombia when I was 18 and never went back. Never went back except for, you know, short trips, you know. In fact, I was there just 3 weeks ago. I left Bogota just in time because of the coronavirus. And I was able to bring my son, who was an exchange student in Bogota, right in time, 48 hours before they closed the border. So now my son is here in Florianopolis, in Ayahuasca, and we are going through this period of quarantine here in Brazil. Best place because we are surrounded by plants. We have a ethnobotanical garden of about 400 species. Dale Millar, a South African naturalist, is here with us as well, and we are connected with people from all over the world, because we have had people here from nearly 50 countries through 20 years. We were going to celebrate 20 years anniversary in now. Well, we are celebrating 20 years. I don't hear you. I don't hear you. I don't hear you.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
Okay.
We'll just take a moment to get this figured out. Dennis, can you hear me? Okay, so Dennis, I'm going to take you off of the stage and then bring you back on, and hopefully that will do something. All right, thank you, everybody.
No. No.
Sounds like we are still having some audio difficulties. Dennis, can you hear me this time? Okay, so we still cannot hear you. I'm wondering, I'm going to take you off of the screen, and if you could close out your browser and reset and then start again. So Luis, we may just have you on for a few moments.
Okay,
if
fine,
you want to
fine.
continue. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, so I was saying that now we are spending this time here in Ayahuasca. In fact, it's our home with my wife, Brazilian wife, Adriana Rosa. Now very happy to have my son here and his partner, Valena, who is pregnant of my very first grandchild. So I'm very happy about it. So a good place to be here, seeing what is happening in the world, and right here, because it's happening right here, also in Florianopolis. So we are 20 kilometers away, but it's happening here in Brazil as well. Anyway, since Dennis is out of the picture now, I can tell you that Terence has been an extraordinary influence in me, to the point that, in a way, this project here was conceived many years ago when we were back in Colombia in 1971. We already talked about at that time about creating a botanical garden, and I always wanted to have a place where I will have my friends from so many disciplines and so on. And so, in a way, this project is, in a way, was conceived by talking to Terence back in 71 and 73 when I was in Berkeley visiting him. No, again, I cannot hear you, Dennis. Terrible.
Thank you so much, Luis, and everyone and everyone in the crowd. I think if you don't mind continuing, we're so grateful to have you here sharing these memories and experience. And it's wonderful in the meantime of figuring out these technical difficulties. So if you want to go ahead, and thanks for being patient while we toggle Dennis on and off to get this figured out.
Okay. All right. So I met Terence 71. I spent 2 months with him in Berkeley, 1973. That's the time when I discovered the work of Rachel Dolmatov and Schultes and Peter Forst and Michael Harner and all this. So I spent my days in Berkeley buying books during the day, the secondhand books, very cheap, and playing ping pong in the evenings, and then in the late evenings with Terence and friends he had from many disciplines. We were watching Watergate the time, and there was always a joint around, and so very interesting time. 73. Then in 1979, 71, I had my. Sorry, 79. I went to Yurayaco to see Don Apolinar again. I forgot to say, during the time we were in Villa Gloria, we took Yahe together for the first time. It was the first time for both of us, and Erika was there, and it was also a Hungarian, Carlos, we call him, Carmen Sabo, who got the Yahe from Apolinar. So the first time that we took Yahe together, there was no shaman there. It was just the four of us. We took the Yahe. And I had my first experience, which is, compared to what happened, my experiences later on, it was very mild, but enough to put me on the track. What is this? What is happening? I never had experienced something like this before. And then when I was in 73 in Berkeley, Terence gave me the book by Rachel Dolmatov, Amazonian Cosmos, which he's pointing out the importance of Yahe among the Tucano and the Barazana and other Indians. And I wrote to Rachel Dolmatov, and he was incredible. He was kind enough to reply. And then he told me, if you are interested in these things, the best you can do is study science of some sort, so biology or botany or chemistry, or anything that will somehow make me not to be taken away by speculation, and give me some kind of discipline. And that's what I did, So I moved to Norway. I studied some chemistry, and He even took courses in astronomy and mathematics. It was difficult to get in, but I got in finally. And when I was very enthusiastic about study science, I was teaching at the same time literature at the Oslo University. My colleague said, you know, you don't seem to be interested in our field, you know, so you are more interested in going, you know, science. So I said, okay, I'm sorry, I took 1 year of linguistics, pure linguistics, and then I wrote the thesis in literature. But then when the time came and there was a position ready, free, it was given to a Norwegian. And then I realized, I mean, there is no future for me in Norway. And then I tried to, so one of my colleagues told me, go to the Spanish embassy. Apparently they are looking for a teacher, Spanish teacher in Finland. So I went there and called the person in charge. And it was at the Swedish School of Economics in Helsinki. There is a minority of 300,000 Swedish-speaking people in Finland, Finlandssvensk, you know, they call. And I got the job. The funny thing is that all these synchronicities, you know, like there is a story behind, it seems, you know. When I started to write my doctorate dissertation, I was looking for the work of Rafael Karsten. Rafael Karsten was a Swedish-Finnish sociologist at that time. It was not an anthropology. He was, he was in the Department of Sociology, head of the Department of Sociology. And anyway, he was the first one who did field work in Ecuador among the Shuar. And he is the first, we have the very first description about Natem, or, you know, which is the Yahe, well, is the combination of Anisteropsis capi and probably not even Psychotria or Diplopterus, but I forgot now the name I have. It's growing here outside the house. It would come to me. But anyway, it was the first description that we have of a ceremony, of Yahe ceremony, or a Natem ceremony ever. So I ended up having his position because he was the Spanish lecturer at the Swedish School of Economics in the 30s. So by chance, you know, being born in the Colombian Amazon, going to Spain to study, going to Norway, and then ended up in Helsinki, having the job of the very first person who wrote about these things, you know. It was published he was in the 20s there. It was published in the 40s, I think, the book. Anyway, Dennis, where are you?
Thank you again, Luis. It's
Okay.
amazing to get to hear these moments in history, and thank you again to everyone. We're still working through some technical difficulties. Again, thank you all for being so fluid with this process. I think that collectively we're really in a state of learning how do we respond to new circumstances and connect with each other virtually in a time when we're not used to doing that to start with, and most of these programs aren't used to having this level of traffic on them. So really appreciate you all. I would say, Luis, if you'd like to continue for a little while, we're still working on getting Dennis's audio back on this end. Thank you so much.
Okay,
right.
wait, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, finally,
Wait.
yes.
Can I hear
You can hear me.
Yes.
Wonderful.
I'm afraid to touch anything. I don't know what is
Don't touch anything. Thank you so much, Dennis. And Luis, thank you for taking
this
right.
is terrible.
Okay.
Okay,
So let's see if
I
we
have
can
been
get into
following
something
the
interesting.
thread. You know, so hang on a second. Lost my. It went so smooth last night, you know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess we got complacent. So can you still hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So there are some things I wanted to ask you, a few talking points, if you will.
Okay.
how do you think, how has Terence's legacy impacted contemporary culture? You have any thoughts on that?
Okay, it's very interesting. You see, contemporary culture. I was recently in Bogota 3 weeks ago. I was going to give a talk at the Department of Anthropology of Universidad de los Andes, which is among the best in Colombia. I went to and my talk was canceled 3 hours before because of the coronavirus. So, but I was with the anthropologist, the Department of Anthropologists, and none of them had even heard the name Terence McKenna.
Hmm.
So, so, so world culture, So we are talking about, okay. I don't know how many people in the world now knows about Terence McKenna, and I don't know let's call the psychedelic community. It is dispersed all over the world, but still, it is not something which is so obvious. At least, perhaps in California, it is, and then in other places, I mean, I must say. Remember that I some years ago, 3 years ago, I think that I was invited to give a talk at one of these events, with young people, loud music, what is it called, one of these rapes, in Hungary. And the moment I said the word Terence, Terence McKenna, it was just like a magnet. Suddenly everybody was, very, very aware, of the name. So in
Hmm.
some places, yes, very well known. In other places, not so much. Certainly, in myself and in the people, wonderful people that you have invited, I was very impressed with Bruce. I mean, his talk, it was amazing. I'm already a fan. I mean, by what I heard, I know very little of his work. I'm going to look for it. But it was certainly, he has influenced Bruce. He has influenced Rupert Sheldrake. Certainly many other people that I know. So there is a segment in society, in the Western society, and with some other people here and there who had Terence had a great impact. And I think that Bruce said it so beautifully. It is triggering, accepting imagination is absolutely part of the story, and that's something that I've heard also, that I have experienced through my ayahuasca and all this. There is a whole realm, another realm which is parallel, or many realms parallel to this reality, and so, and including the dream world and all this. So we have to navigate this physical reality within the context of these many other worlds which are around us and very accessible. Sometimes, as Bruce said, without anything, just paying attention.
Right, right. Well, yeah. I mean, whatever we're experiencing, it's being filtered through our nervous systems, So in some way, experience itself is a construct of the mind, and these substances just let you alter the frequency a little bit, or
Right,
sometimes
right.
profoundly, right? Right? Yeah. So your whole life and career, in some ways, stems from that chance encounter in the cantina in Florencia,
Yes, yes.
and you were on a track. I have not been listening to the total of your thread because I've been trying to work out these audio problems, but you were set to go to the seminary in Spain. That
But
was
that was
where.
before. That was before I met Terence. I was in the seminar. Yes, yes. I was in the seminar and left the seminar more because of the because all these restrictions, intellectual restrictions.
Hmm.
There was we were living in the time of the index, the forbidden books. I became a librarian in the monastery, so I was able to read whatever I wanted, without asking permission anybody. But the restrictions, they were too much for me, so I left the seminar.
So you were
I
you
left
were
the
all you were already falling away from the faith, as it
Oh,
were,
absolutely,
before you met
absolutely.
Terence. You were
Yeah,
looking
yes, yes.
for the next big the next direction, and perhaps he
Right.
uh,
Absolutely.
he
So,
provided that. So how has
yes,
this influenced your career? What I mean, when you think about Terrence's impact, of course, we've all you know, of all the people that we're interviewing during this series, you actually have known Terrence the
the
longest.
longest.
You know, you've known him longer than you've known me, and I feel like we've known each other for many years. But I didn't meet you till 10 years later. You actually met
Right.
Terrence in 1971, in the year of the
Yes,
experiment. You
right.
know, so how has that
And, and I was
influenced
with him
your
And I
career?
was with him in 1973, because remember,
That's
the time
right.
wave zero was supposed the end, or the end of history, or the ingression of the infinite novelty was supposed to happen December 21st, 1973.
That's right. That's
Yes,
right.
and I was in July. I was with Terence in Berkeley, and that was when Kohoutek, the comet, had a perihelion on the 21st of December, and the central part of the eclipse was going through over Belém do Pará in Brazil, and so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Terence was saying, that's it, it is going to happen, And the funny thing is that when I was then living in Norway, I went back to Norway, and the plaza, in the main square, they were all covered with papers with the UFOs and Jesus and the end of the world, because of Kohoutek, So
Right.
it was just like saying, wow, this is really
Right.
happening. So
And Kohoutek too is another one of these things that turned out to be kind of a non-event. It was very, very
right.
disappointing when it finally came up. I think it's
But it was
interesting that,
it was
that
like a joke, It was like
yeah,
a joke, the whole thing.
exactly. Yeah, I mean there were many instances. Well, Terence was, the actual end date of the time wave was a matter of speculation, and he evaluated many possible end dates, and then finally settled on an end date in, I think it was November 20
I see.
2012, and then found out about the Mayan calendar. So it was just a
The movie.
minor tweak in just a couple of weeks, and we were talking about cycles of literally billions of years.
Yeah, right.
What's a few days either way,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but it was great fun, because there was also a very nice way to study history. You have some graph and say what happened here, what happened there, and you're jumping in history, and that's giving you something. Because at the end, now we are in a situation with the Anthropocene, and now even more with this virus, in which we can see, our history in a big way. Like we never were able to do it before, thanks to all the information we have. I mean, it's so now we are able to have a big picture, and even a bigger picture than 20 years ago, of course. I was
Mhm.
listening to looking at this video with Terence talking about the Amazon, it being populated with very few people. That has been completely, you know, tom- you know, Terence had, even though we speculated, remember having conversations with Terence that perhaps, the Mesoamerican civilization and the South American civilization came from the Amazon. But still, then we found out that, wow, the Amazon was heavily populated. We have big, huge, and extremely sophisticated in terms of pharmacology, in terms of plant knowledge. So
Right.
they didn't have big cities, but they have knowledge of how to, modify your consciousness. The great experts in the science of consciousness were the Amazonians.
Yes, and of course, all this knowledge is in danger because the people that are the stewards of this knowledge are threatened. Their habitats, their ecosystems are threatened. The plants are in danger. There's a great deal of pressure on ayahuasca right now from over harvesting. I mean, and so what do you think? may have, your publication of your book may have contributed to the the rise of global interest in ayahuasca, and other things did too. Not that you're at fault for that. I'm not even sure it's a bad thing, but what's your perspective? I mean, why did ayahuasca suddenly come out of the Amazon and become a global phenomenon? I mean, in part, certainly part of it had to do with the fact that, it escaped. I mean, it escaped to Hawaii. Terence and I essentially liberated it to Hawaii. But it spread all over the world.
To Hawaii. I took the psychotrias to Hawaii.
You brought the psychotrias to Hawaii, and also many of the Banisteriopsis that we had there. So yes. What is your perspective on on ayahuasca as a global phenomenon? I mean,
it is.
Is this a good thing?
It is so big, and it is difficult to because I have met a lot of people who have been completely transformed by one or two experiences. I think that the problem is the commodization, the people who are, boasting, I took 500 times ayahuasca. I took, I mean, why, I mean, the moment it becomes a commodity, something that you take again and again, and you believe that you are getting better and better because you drink this thing, I mean, it depends what happens with you, how it changes your personal life. And I met many people whose life had changed for the positive in many, many different ways, including myself. I think that what ayahuasca has given me, most important, is this sensitivity towards nature. I mean, animism. That's for me the most important. And animism not as a philosophy, not as an abstract thing. It's not a intellectual conversation. Animism is about direct, intimate knowledge with the natural world. And then, because when you have that contact, then intelligence is there. Obviously, it's you can see it. You can see it, you can feel it, there is no doubt, and so.
Right. Yeah. It's not something you can conceptualize. You can conceptualize it, but that's different than experiencing it.
Right.
And I think that's what ayahuasca does. It gives, I think that ayahuasca brings the background forward. I've often said this about psychedelics, that there are always things going on in the background that we are programmed not to notice because they're not relevant to our immediate survival. But psychedelics you can have permission to step out of your reference frame and look at what's going on in the background. And I think this state of consciousness is very similar to an indigenous person's state of consciousness. I think that they are kind of always there. We have to take ayahuasca to get there, but that's the world they live in. And as wonderful as literacy is, I think that literacy kind of interposes a barrier between this direct experience. And this is, when we're all Western educated, literate people. Even if we don't read books anymore, we still have that perspective. So what would come naturally to an indigenous person who doesn't have the impediments of civilization is a skill or a knowledge that we have to learn. And these plant teachers that's how we can learn them. When I say plant teacher, you wrote a paper about the plant teacher. You studied vegetalismo. How do you view this now? How do you view the way that the people in the vegetalismo tradition viewed plant teachers, and how do you relate to that concept?
Well, I mean, for me, it is not any longer an abstract. It's not an abstract concept. It is based on experience in a way. And I mean, I do. It's not belief. It is there. It is an obvious thing. So you tap. Now the problem is when we take a plant teacher, we always try to anthropomorphize everything. The plant teacher has to be what, it's an entity, entities. I mean, simply is the door into so many other entities out there. Or everything alive, everything intelligent, mind and body, mind and matter being in a way one. And I think that is
Right.
the shamanic way of seeing things. And I'm thinking that what is happening right now with the virus and all this, I don't know, perhaps this is an opportunity. I've been talking a lot, at conferences about animism and how, intelligence in nature. And I've been very touch with very good friends, Jeremy Narby, Monica Galliano, who have been, Monica, a real scientist, who is telling us that what, the experiments he made were like, in a way, like given, by the plants. Those spoke the plant, and so I can see that it is a reality. And I was thinking, you talk to this, how can normal people understand animism? What does it matter, in a world where we are full of distractions all the time? But
Mm-hmm.
suddenly this happened. Suddenly, I think that now this is the moment where perhaps people are going to pay attention to some ideas. So I see it as a fantastic opportunity to bring, this idea and many others, of course, but is that we are not, the most advanced species on this planet. I mean, now we have the little virus, it's just causing havoc, and it's one of the many to come, perhaps, So we are not the top of creation, but
Yes.
we have this, we have learned so much about where we are that this is a fantastic opportunity to, in a way, mix, what science has taught us and what animism, animistic societies are giving us, and blend the two of them. And, so there is perhaps an opportunity.
Right. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. That it is the coronavirus is giving us a tremendous opportunity to again reflect and bring back the focus to what ayahuasca has been pounding into our heads ever since we've been taking it, which is that we monkeys are not running this show, and we are not even necessarily the most intelligent species on the earth. We like to arrogate that to us because we have these big brains and these complex nervous systems and these hands and that manipulate the environment, and in some very cynical way you could say that all those things have given us better tools to screw things up. Other species are not driven to do that, and I mean, nor could they, because they don't have that mindset. I often say in my talks that ayahuasca is it's a catalyst for waking us up. I mean, and that's why it's escaped from its Amazonian home and moved across the world. We think that we're doing this, and in part we are. I mean, we partnered with, we meaning the human species has partnered with ayahuasca to spread it across the globe. But I don't think it necessarily originated with us. What plants like to do is spread. They want to move into new niches. And ayahuasca, I think that Gaia is getting a little bit nervous, actually quite nervous, about the fact that the monkeys are not listening. The monkeys are not waking up to what's happening. So she sends out her ambassadors, which are these teacher plants, and I'm anthropomorphizing this whole thing. You don't really have, that's a way to look at it, but you can take that element out of it and just say, this is Gaia is a concept for something that this planetary size homeostatic system that is a living thing. I mean, it's a super organism. That's a popular word now. It's a super organism made up of all organisms on the planet. And it acts in an intelligent way to optimize conditions for survival, which would include eliminating or certainly, interfering with species like us that are actually a threat to the continuance of Gaia. And yet, it's interesting. Gaia, I sense there's a certain compassion in Gaia. It sends ayahuasca to try to convey a message that, you monkeys need to wake up, or it sends mushrooms, or it sends the coronavirus, it sends a different kind of message. And it's hard to think of the coronavirus as a benevolent influence, but actually it may be. We're waking up to a whole bunch of things that we haven't woken up to before. So as a catalyst for waking up, the coronavirus is perhaps more effective than ayahuasca.
Right.
Ayahuasca only gets to a small number of people. Coronavirus speaks to everyone and more or less forces us to wake up.
Right. Yes.
What we do with that realization, once we have made it, is, I guess, the $64 question right now. Where do we go from here? There you are, Genevieve. Well,
does it mean that it is over?
Means that
thank you both so much. We're moving into the question and answer section. And
right.
This has been an amazing conversation so far. Thank you both. And kind of going along in that vein, I'd like to ask a question about what are your thoughts on ayahuasca tourism?
Me or Denise?
I'm sure both of you would have something to say.
Well,
good question.
It's a very good question. Well, the last time I was in Iquitos was the year 2000. I think I went with you, Dennis. I think Alan Shoemaker invited us to his very first meeting there.
Mm-hmm.
And for me it was a shock, because I had been there. It's in the Peruvian Amazon, 1980. I met Don Emilio, made the film Don Emilio and His Little Doctors, which, by the way, you can find in YouTube. I think that this is the very first ayahuasca film.
Yes, and I might add, probably one of the best documentaries on ayahuasca made, because it's cinematographically, it's very amateurish, but the message is important. Don Emilio and His Little Doctors, go to YouTube and watch it sometime. Anyway, go on.
Okay, so
to highlight that.
And then from 1995 and on, I worked mostly with Pablo. We created a school of painting. I was putting all my energy, organizing things in a way. So I didn't, I will say that I stopped doing the field work, let's call it this way. I'm a vegetalista. I took eventually from time to time with one or another, but I put my energy more in Pablo's work and the school of painting for several years, many years, in fact. So in the year 2000, I went back to that conference, and the bus took us to Guillermo Arevalo's place to take ayahuasca. A bus full of people from all over the world, and then a huge number of people taking it, and I was amazed, appalled almost, because also the a lot of people it was very important, but for many of them it's simply just a tourist trip. It's just they could say to their friends, I was in the Amazon, I took ayahuasca. It was more, so I don't know what to think. For some people have been so absolutely important, changed their lives in the positive way. For others have been just a commodity, just one more thing that they did, in order to impress their friends, So I don't know, but still, I think that the positive is there, because a lot of people, are doing great things, new ideas, and especially in the arts, and the music, and also the ideas. I mean, I know that they has influenced a lot of thinkers. Some great people, or many of our friends, of course.
Yeah, this ayahuasca tourism, I mean, it's such a complex issue. In many ways, we know that sometimes that the impact of ayahuasca tourism on the indigenous communities or mestizo communities it's a two-edged sword. It brings economic activity into these communities, which may or may not be a benefit. There's the whole spectrum of people that seek the experience. I think that people, by and large, who go to South America to take ayahuasca, they're not thrill seekers, and there are some, I suppose, who want to be able to say, well, I did ayahuasca, I did the hip fashionable thing and took ayahuasca. I think many more people are sincerely motivated by a desire for meaningful experience,
Yes.
which has been taken out of our society. I mean, our religions are hollowed out shells of what they're supposed to be. They don't provide any spiritual sustenance, really. They provide a set of rules that you're supposed to follow, and they don't give, much guidance. And I think people are rejecting that, and yet they still want that genuine spiritual experience, and
Yes.
and they go in search of it. Now, in their search, they may be insensitive to how disruptive this can be for those cultures. It's inevitable. I mean, you can't fence these cultures off. You can't, put them on reservations. I view this thing as a part of the coevolutionary process. That's how I explain it to myself, maybe justify it to myself. If you look at it from that perspective, we are involved in a very long-term coevolutionary symbiosis with this plant. And we've been involved in that for nobody knows how long, at least thousands of years. This is a stage in that, in that it has moved out of its ancestral home and now it's operating globally, partly as a reflection of the urgency that people get its message, that people, and that's the thing. The important thing with any psychedelic is what happens between the person who experiences the medicine. And it needs to happen in a context, and that may be a therapeutic context, it may be a traditional shamanic context, any of these things. But what really goes on, the teaching, if you will, of the plant teachers is one-on-one. It's between the person and the medicine. Mm-hmm. And that's an important message, and people can internalize that and perhaps change their lives and go home and make changes. And you see this happening. Ayahuasca tourism is not going to go away. What I would like to see happen eventually, I'm encouraged by these decriminalization movements that are happening in the States on the municipality level. Because what that may lead to is virtually, well, in the first place, the idea that you could criminalize any plant is absurd on the face of it. I mean, this is just a reflection of the arrogance we have about nature and our presumption that we own it. So that's something we need to get disabused of. But I think that, I think that these decriminalization movements are very encouraging because it opens up the possibility, instead of people coming to South America to take the medicine, you might be able to bring the medicine to North America, because there are all these centers right now that exist in almost every community, but they're underground. They're technically illegal. If they could step out of the shadow and actually operate in the open, you could reverse the equation and without impact, and I think that would be much better. And you could benefit the indigenous people because they would be producing this material, getting economic benefit from that, but not having crazy gringos tromp all over their villages and their traditions and so on. Or there would be less of that. There would be less of that.
Right.
So maybe that's a good direction that this thing could go, because ayahuasca and these plants, mushrooms and ayahuasca primarily, the others, but ayahuasca is now part of the global conversation, and it's not going to go away, and so we have to learn how to integrate our use of these plant teachers, ayahuasca, mushrooms, iboga, into our society in a respectful way that respects their traditions, and yet also speaks to post 20th century modern people. This is the challenge. How do we combine these ancient traditions with our current global consciousness, global mindset? This is the challenge. Anyway, much could be said about ayahuasca tourism, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dennis, for that. I really appreciate that perspective. And Luis, we do have several questions that fall along that same vein that Dennis almost answered towards the end here. And I'm wondering if you might be able to follow up. There's a question about, can you talk about sustainability, indigenous stewardship, and world opposing cosmologies? Just to really piggyback on the end of that last question.
You mean sustainability of ayahuasca, or in
The
general?
The question doesn't state that, but I would imagine that
Okay.
there's some things to be
Okay.
said about
Well,
ayahuasca as well.
we
Yeah.
have been doing here some experiments, interesting ones, planting, here we have a botanical garden, and we are doing some experiments with Dale Millard, the South African naturalist, and we have been planting the vine together with a fast-growing tree, like I don't remember now the name. Um, um, we did experiments, and we came to growing the plant vertically. The two species somehow they get along. Ayahuasca could kill it immediately, but they get along and grow together, and they both plants produce a lot of biomass, and so this biomass is accumulating at the bottom. And what a way to recover lands, poor land, the trapped by cattle, to recover, the topsoil, and these are you could plant other trees as well. So it could be a process of um, recovering land and giving work to a lot of people in the Amazon. It will take
Yes.
some years, 5-6 years,
Right.
but still, it will be possible. And now we know that ayahuasca, the Banisteriopsis, is not only, don't think about only about the visions, and Banisteriopsis independently of DMT, plants, like Psychotria and Diplopteros, is an extraordinary medicine by itself. And so it will be possible to establish this kind of markets, of a plant which is not scheduled, because that doesn't produce DMT. You could make extracts of Banisteriopsis, and for many different illnesses. In fact, in the book that you publish, Dennis, from the Turingham talks, there is an article by Dale Millard with all the properties of harmine. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So there is a possibility of combining the interest in these plants with economic development, and including the indigenous people, who are losing their land so fast. I mean, especially here in Brazil, this is obscene. The murder of indigenous leaders that taking their land for gold extraction. It is a tragedy. I used to say, 1492 is going on to this day. 1492, which was for me historically the biggest change, in history. It's going on to our very day here. We can see it here. The Indians here on the island of Santa, the few ones, on this island, they are in terrible situation. they're invisible. Now in the coronavirus, there is no help to them. Indigenous people can die out in this epidemic, like flies, and so I see it as very urgent that we have to take the side of the indigenous people. We need them. We need them more than ever.
Yes.
We need their knowledge. We need their attitude more than ever.
Exactly. And, what's going on in Brazil is also reflects what's going on in the United States. I think much of it comes down to the fact that these are essentially criminal regimes. Let's call them what they are. Bolsonaro's policies are government-endorsed genocide. That's the policy, that indigenous people are subhuman and therefore can be wiped out without any, they see no value in their knowledge and in their traditions.
Absolutely.
Well, and so ayahuasca is a way perhaps to slow that down. I think that, and as you point out, ayahuasca itself, the vine, we're suddenly discovering, or not suddenly, but over the last few years, we've discovered many medicinal properties that it has that are not even related to its use as a psychedelic. This is a valuable medicine, and it's just remarkable to me. Here you've got a plant that's been studied chemically, pharmacologically, ever since it was discovered 150 years ago, and we're still learning new things from this.
Right.
So I think part of the solution to sustainability is obvious. Grow more ayahuasca. Grow it everywhere that you can. And also,
and many other plants, and many other plant teachers,
and many other
reforestation
programs, which are now, you will see more and more of those as the Amazon gets depleted. Reforestation programs should just, as a fundamental, include the planting of ayahuasca and the admixture plants as part of the understory, and it just should be included in any kind of reforestation program. There is a lot of pressure on these plants right now, and especially the old vines. So there needs to be some way to manage this that is not the colonialists coming in and telling people how they're going to do it. It's got to be a grassroots kind of movement, and people have to realize the value of the resource that they've been stewards of for so long, and let them manage it, but create a framework so that there's not this over harvesting, and I'm not sure, and reversing the equation, essentially saying ayahuasca is a sacred medicine, like Oakland has done, like other municipalities have done. They've just legalized these psychedelic plants across the board. So now that opens a way to reverse the flow, bring the medicine to North America, and that's where it's needed, and send the money south to the people that are producing it. And we're in this transitional state now, but maybe in a few years that will happen. And so I'm hopeful. At the same time, I'm worried that it's being depleted much too quickly. And people need it. Not just indigenous people. The world needs it. Humanity. Ayahuasca is a gift to humanity. And it's a gift from Gaia. The indigenous people are the stewards of it, but I don't think they would assert ownership. They don't even relate to their environment in those terms. They have nurtured it. They've been the stewards of it. How can we respect that and still get its message out to the rest of the world? Because the rest of the world needs it. They needs it for this waking up process that must go on if we're going to save ourselves.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. This is such a potent and important topic as we move into this time in the world where we're all trying so hard to wake up and shift culture in this way. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to bring in a question on the Icaros. The question is, what are your thoughts on the Amazonian perspective on how might the Icaro, specifically the cadence, rhythm, and etymology of the words sung by the maestro as a medium for plant symbiosis, how might these aid in cleaning or helping to heal a patient or participant from a given illness stemming from psychological, physiological, or in the case of Amerindian cosmology, a magical illness such as soul fragmentation of spirit intrusion?
Wow, that's a big question. Um,
Yeah.
okay, what part of it I will answer, but anyway, okay. First, a very good opportunity. There are over 2,000 people here online. When I hear somebody, even a shaman, say Icaro, I know that it has been influenced by the Western because it is pronounced Icaro.
Oh, thank
Icaro.
you. Thank you very
Icarar,
much. Caro.
Icaro, no? Icaro, Icarar is to sing a song to give power to whatever, to tobacco, or that's Icarar or Icarar, you can Icarar your tobacco, you can Icarar a person, so you are giving, and so it is. So the indicados in the Amazon, in the tradition I was studying, these are given by the plants. I mean, during you get the songs. And these songs are very effective to the point that, for instance, when I was with the Shipibo, in I spent a month doing the diet there, and I asked, oh, I forgot now the name of my teacher. That's terrible. I asked him, where are the plants? Because I was collecting plants, I was collecting plants and say, where are the plants? And then he told me, if you know the song of the plant, you don't need the plant. The songs will do it. So, so the whole healing in the Shipibo tradition is these songs, not only the songs, but giving the perfumes and the scents, it's a very aesthetic way of healing. You hear these beautiful songs and good smell and all this, and this gives you peace, and it helps the healing. Don Basilio Gordon was my Shipibo teacher for a month. I spent with him in Santa Rosa de Pirococha on the Ucayali River. So yes, but but I myself, I found out that okay, the Icaros are beautiful, powerful, etc. But you can do a lot with recorded music as well. You can music by itself can take you to many interesting places. So that it is not necessary in a way, or other instrument, or people playing music in the ayahuasca session. All this, the music is very important, very important. In fact, the Siona said that to take yahe and not to sing, it's impossible. It's part of it. The music is part of it. So yeah, so extremely important, extremely important. But as I said, it's music in general, not only Icaros. Icaros, beautiful, powerful. There are some shamans that have beautiful Icaros, but now in the Amazon, you hear the same Icaro sung in different ways, by different people. So it's originally the Icaros are given to you by the plants. And so originally, at least when I was doing my first work, every vegetalista will have his own Icaros, and you don't sing the Icaro of somebody else. But then even in the Amazon, then you started to see vegetalistas who want the people to sing together. That's like the beginning of the formation of religion in a way. I've seen it happening there as well. In Brazil, it happened very very clearly, but also in Peru, you see that some kind, the songs of somebody, and so yeah, so there are many possibilities there. It's there is a beautiful doctoral thesis by Susana Bustos, a Chilean anthropologist who lives in the Bay Area, about the Icaros and the feeling. It's a phenomenological study of Icaros and what people perceive, feel themselves, the patients or the people participated in the ceremony. Very interesting.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. That is a beautiful explanation, and thank you so much for the correction on the pronunciation. So it looks like we've got about 6 minutes left. So I'm wondering, there's a question here, Luis, if you could talk about the Ayahuasca Institute. Says, it seems like a very interesting place. I live here. I'm a student of biology in UFSC. You're a reputed professor there in the Department of Anthropology. Can you tell more about those times of being a professor and about the Institute?
Okay, well, I was, before Ayahuasca, created Ayahuasca, I was teaching here at the Universidad Federal de Santa Catarina, 4.5 years, which I was a first visiting professor and then a professor in anthropology. But it was during that time that I had the idea, about a piece of land, and I had the idea to build a place where I will invite my friends and have a botanical garden. And in fact, what Terence and we were talking about so many years ago, he did it in Hawaii on an island, and I did it here on another island in the south. So in a way, his spirit is here. So this is a place that I created. We have a botanical garden, as I said, a good library, 4,000 books. But then I have been invited here extraordinary people through the years. We are going to celebrate 20 years, So we have had Dennis many times, Graham Hancock, Ede Fresca, so many David Nichols, so many interesting, extraordinary people. And for me, Ayahuasca is a place of conversation, dialogues, history, physics, biology, whatever discipline, we are all getting enriched, So since in a way, I have to give up the university here in Florianopolis, we went back to Finland for personal reasons and to continue being a Spanish teacher, a Spanish lecturer. With Ayahuasca, I wanted to bring the university to my home. And that's what has been happening, Extraordinary. Rupert was here last year, Bernard Carr, cosmologists. We have extraordinary people. And just this is a tiny little groups, 10 people, 10, 11 participants, 4, 5 teachers. And we get here together for 2 weeks. Excellent food, organic, because it's part of the healing process and all this. So this is a place for dialogues of many disciplines. And, yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. In many ways, Ayahuasca is what the McKenna Academy aspires to be. You have already done it. You've created what I call a catalytic nexus for global consciousness transformation. That's what the Academy is conceived as being, and that's what Ayahuasca is, and it's been around 20 years.
Yes.
The only drawback, and I'm not sure it is a drawback, but you can only have fairly small groups. But that's okay, because the best conversations go on in fairly small groups. So
exactly.
And you have had amazing people there. So I highly recommend anyone that wants to have a very edifying learning experience, check it out, and go to Ayahuasca if you can. You will not be disappointed. In the text box, it scrolled back up, but I did want to mention ICERS, ICERS.org, which is an organization that's doing the best work to address the sustainability issues with ayahuasca, and also the preservation of the indigenous knowledge, and also some of the legal issues. They've created an ayahuasca legal defense fund for curanderos, vegetalistas, and so on that go to other countries and run afoul of the law. So check out ICERS. It's an International Center for Ethnobotanical Education, Research and Service. and they're a great organization and they deserve your support. So I just want to put a plug in there for ICERS.
Thank you for that, Dennis. And that actually brings me to the last question, following kind of in that vein. Someone asked, Dennis, what are your future plans for the McKenna Academy?
Well, the future plans are wide open. I mean, what we're doing, events like this is part of fulfilling the mission of the McKenna Academy. The McKenna Academy wants to be a place for education and learning about our place in nature. The full title is Natural Philosophy. It's the McKenna Academy of Natural Philosophy. Natural philosophy is what science was before it became reductionist and before it lost, it in a sense, when natural philosophy evolved into what we now call science, a lot was lost. And perhaps the perception that there are different ways of knowing that are not necessarily quantitative, that don't have to be measured. Now, that's a big part of science, but that's not the whole story. So I'm hoping that the McKenna Academy can be a catalyst for this type of learning. We have ambitions to, we do work in the Sacred Valley in Peru. We have done retreats and conferences and that sort of thing, and we want to continue that. Eventually, we might be able to make a physical campus for the Academy in that region, as Eduardo's done with Ayahuasca. But now that coronavirus is sort of changing our perspective on all this, we've had to respond to that. We canceled 2 big symposia we were going to have in San Francisco and had to pivot to the digital side. This is what you're seeing is the response to that. So I think the McKenna Academy it's fulfilling its mission. Please check out the website and send us feedback. If you want to support it, you can do that. We're a nonprofit. We're going to have be able to offer tax deductions soon. We're finding a fiscal sponsor in the States. We're incorporated in Canada. We're a nonprofit in Canada where I now live, but we will have a way for people who want to support us and have a tax deduction. We can make that possible. But please just check out the website and see if you like what we're talking about. It's a work in progress. And it's very much about symbiosis and collaboration. So if you have ideas for conferences or projects or other things that you would like to bring forth, then we're receptive and open to that. This is something, even though it's got my name on it, it's a collective effort. It's not all about me. In fact, hopefully very little of it is about me. I want to bring the best minds, the most creative people possible together to create this and essentially create the McKenna Academy as an analog to Eleusis. I want it to be the first psychedelic university in 1,500 years. There has not been one that exists since Eleusis was sacked and burned in 396 AD. That's where the psychedelic tradition in Western culture was essentially brought to the ground, essentially stomped out by the state religion of Christianity, which was gaining hegemony at that time. Well, we need to bring the mystery schools back. And that's what the McKenna Academy seeks to be, is a modern mystery school with historical roots to Eleusis, but a modern link to institutions like Esalen, for example. Mm-hmm. Think tanks, places where people come and learn to think and learn from each other. And in the case of the Academy, learn from the plant teachers. I sometimes say the McKenna Academy will be the first university where not all the faculty are human. Mm-hmm. So check it out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to both of you for an incredible afternoon touching on so many important topics right now. So I'm just going to let everyone know we are moving towards our breakout session section of the program. And just want to remind everybody to come to our following programs. On April 11th, we'll have Paul Stamets speaking, as well as Wade Davis. And on April 18th, the following Saturday, we will have Dennis McKenna, Rupert Sheldrake, and also Ralph Abram speaking together. So definitely check
Ralph
Abraham.
Abraham.
Excuse me. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you. And that's going to go from 12 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time to 4:30 p.m. It's a 4.5-hour program on both of these following Saturdays. Shortly after this session ends, the replay for all of today will be available through this same link. So you can come back here and check it out. There is a share button for social media, so you can share this with people and it will link them directly back to here. So please let your friends know. Also, we are collecting people's favorite moments of Terence. There's a button at the bottom of the screen that says submit your Terence favorites. And so if there's a piece of art that really speaks to you, or a quote of his, a talk, some people have mixed together really amazing music with his words. Let us know about it. It's amazing to see the collective ripples reflected back through your contributions. And we'll be posting those on the McKenna Academy website as well as on social media. So let us know what stands out to you. We'd love to hear it. Let's see what else we need to go to. I think we are just about ready to move out into the breakout session. Thank you again, everybody, so much.
Thank you.
One question, Genevieve, before we go. I just saw scroll by. Can people also still watch the last night's event? That's also on the web, and they can go look at that again. Is that right?
Yes, definitely. So Crowdcast is
okay.
amazing as a platform in that you can both view things again, and you can also click on the questions that were asked, and it will bring you directly to that section of the talk. And both on this event page here, as well as our Facebook event pages, there are links to both of the different nights. Friday night was its own link, and then the following 3 Saturdays, today and the next 2 Saturdays, can all be accessed through this link here.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. So if you click on the top of your screen, you should be able to see that there are number 2 breakout sessions. And so I believe there are 5 of them. So you can go directly into these breakout sessions now to continue the discussion. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much.
Okay. What is the breakout sessions? I don't know.
So if you go to the top of the screen and select more, you'll see right below this current section. It says breakout number 2, acceptance and integration, therapeutic use, recreational use. So people can go right there from this section here. All right, I'm going to bring everyone off screen. Thank you again so much.
Okay. Thank you. Acceptance, integration, breakout.